So I told you guys that I would record a video going through what to do when you have a coefficient that's not 1. So to find our possible zeros, we need two things. We need our factors of 10 and we need our factors of 6. Let me go ahead and just highlight those so we're kind of a little bit different. So our factors of 10 are going to be blue. Our factors of 6 are going to be green. So thinking about our factors of 10, well, there's several. There is positive and negative 1, positive and negative 2, positive and negative 5, and positive and negative 10. And then my factors of 6, there's positive and negative 1, positive and negative 2, positive and negative 3, and positive and negative 6. So what makes these problems that have a leading coefficient more interesting is that I actually have to divide every single number on top by every single number on bottom. So I'm going to start with my top numbers. I'm going to start with 1, 2, positive negative 1, positive negative 2, positive and negative 5, and positive and negative 10. And so first, I'm going to divide each of these by my first denominator. And my first denominator was positive 1. So I'm going to divide all these by positive and negative 1. And after I write this, I actually need to go ahead and reduce these out. So 1 divided by 1 is 1. 2 divided by 1 is 2. 5 divided by 1 is 5. And 10 divided by 1 is 10. And then I'm going to repeat the process, but the second time I do it, I'm going to divide all of my numerators by the second number in my denominator, and the second number in my denominator was 2. So I'm going to divide each of these by positive and negative 2. And again, just like before, I need to go ahead and I need to reduce or divide these out. And the reason you have to divide these out is you need to see if any of them duplicate, and sometimes they will. It's like 1 divided by 2 is still going to be 1/2. But 2 divided by 2 gives me 1. And notice I already have 1. I've got that from up here, so that means I can ignore this option. And then I would do the same thing. 5 over 2 is positive and negative 5 over 2. And 10 divided by 2 is positive and negative 5. Again, I already have a positive and negative 5. So I can ignore this possibility because I've already got it showing up once. And then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to take all the numbers in my numerator, 1, 2, 5, and 10. And I'm going to divide them by the next number in my denominator, and the next number in my denominator was positive and negative 3. And just like before, I'm going to go ahead and see if I can reduce anything. So 1 divided by 3, I can't reduce that or divide that out, so it's just 1/3. 2 divided by 3 becomes 2/3. 5 divided by 3 is still 5/3. And, oops, I apologize, that should not say 2, that should say 10. So let's try that again, and 10 divided by 3 is 10/3. So none of those duplicated, alright, so then I do the whole process again, but this next time I go with the last number in my denominator, which is 6. So I'm going to take same numerators, 1, 2, 5, and 10. And I'm going to divide them by the next number, or the last number in my denominator in this case, which was 6. And I need to go ahead and reduce or divide out, simplify, however you want to say that. So 1 over 6 is still 1 over 6. 2 over 6 becomes 1/3. It reduces to 1/3. And notice I already had a 1/3. I had that one here, so I can ignore this one. And 5 over 6, I can't reduce that, so it still stays 5 over 6. 10 over 6, that reduces, and that becomes 5/3, because you can divide both of them by 2. But again, I already had a 5/3, so that means I can ignore this one. So for this problem, you are looking at now your list of all of your possible factors. So there are a total of 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24 possible factors for possible zeros, I'm sorry, for this problem. So that would be your answer. Now, for this top part, all you have to do is determine what the possible factors, the possible zeros are. Remember, the top problems, you're not actually dividing anything out. You are not actually like working anything out to do the math. You're just deciding what are the possibles, not actually which ones are the real ones. So I want to talk to you about what happens if you end up with a fraction, because we didn't talk about any with fractions, and the reason none of ours had fractions is because they didn't have leading coefficients. So just like we on yesterday took all these numbers, 1, 2, our whole numbers, 1, 2, 5, and 10, and plugged them into our equation, we have to do the same thing with our fractions. 1/2, 5 halves, 1/3, 2/3, 5/3, 10/3, 1/6, and 5/6. We would do the exact same thing. And what happens is if, and again, you're not doing this for this problem. I'm just saying if, because I don't actually think this one works. But let's suppose that you plugged in 1. I'm sorry, let me try to separate those instead of positive and negative. Let's just do positive 1, negative 1. I'm just picking a couple here. 2, negative 2, 1/2, and negative 1/2, and 1/3 and negative 1/3. And again, I'm just picking a couple of these numbers just to kind of give you an example of what would happen. And I promise, I know if you were to do the math on these, they don't work out the way that I'm saying they're going to work out. Okay, so we're just pretending right now. So let's pretend when we plugged in 1, we got 0. And we plugged in negative 1, we got 25. When we plugged in 2, we got 30. When we plugged in negative 2, we got 0. 1/2, let's say that one gave us 0. Negative 1/2, again, I'm just making up stuff. This is not real. I realize if you plug these numbers in, it's not going to work. I know this. If you plug in negative 1/2, let's say that it gives you 7, and then 1/3 gave you 12, and negative 1/3 gave you 0. So remember what we learned yesterday. And again, I know these aren't real. Like, I'm just making this up just so that we can say, oh, this is what you do when you have fractions. So the ones with zeros are the zeros of my function. They are my factors. So that's easy for the first one. The first one would be x minus 1. The second one, that's easy. That'd be x plus 2. The question is, what do you do with the fractions? So here's what happens when you have a fraction. For example, like 1/2. When you have a fraction, the denominator becomes your coefficient of x. It still switches signs, so it becomes 2x minus 1. Okay, 2x and then minus 1. The same thing is going to happen here. That if I have a 0 of negative 1/3, that when you write that as a factor, it becomes 3x, switches signs, plus 1. The big thing to note is that your denominator comes up and becomes your coefficient. So whatever the denominator of the fraction was, it comes up and becomes the coefficient. All right, so that should help you guys out with what to do with fractions and what to do with leading coefficients. So I sent a message out and remind if you got that grade. If not, for your homework, remember it is due on Tuesday. That is important to note. The homework is due on Tuesday. And I only want you to do the even problems on this assignment. I know there's way more problems than that. I think there's like a total of 20 problems or something. You're only doing the evens, which is all the ones I believe on the right side. So if for some reason you had decided to start it last night at home and you had done some of the odds, then all you need to do is message me on Remind, and I will tell you what I want you to do, because I'm not going to make you do more work than anybody else just because you decided to work ahead. But if you'll message me on Remind, which my Remind information, in case you don't have it, if you don't have my Remind information, then you need to text the number, you're going to text the number 81010 with the message, and what this message needs to say is at 4EEB 68A. That's 4EE. This is a B. This is a 6. I know that when I write on here, my 6's and my b's tend to look alike. So this is a 6. This is the letter B. So if you have not subscribed to my Remind, you can do that. You can text me, and I'll reply back to you with what I want you to do for your assignment since you'd already started on stuff. Hope you guys have a great day, and be nice to substitute. Bye.